I like what you're saying because like Rutgers has what over 2,000 veterans,
2,000 military affiliated. So yeah.
ROTC and everything, correct?
Yeah.
But then you like it. I like what you're saying because also you look at Princeton that has like less than 30. So there really a need an investment on a building there, and the affiliation with out resourcing is so important, But I like the fact that you guys have created a network of unity to really try to, for example, that Princeton student that doesn't have an affiliation, a veteran affair affiliation building there, they can contact anywhere, anyone, And I like that. I like the fact that we're thinking outside of the box in this term. Autumn, I don't know. Pretty sure you have a good question for the ladies.
Do you find that you have to talk about military with professors more or like students who are with other students?
Like traditional non-veteran students. I think it could be both. I mean, statistically, they think, Pew Research did this poll in 2011, so it's quite outdated. But what they found was it depended on how old you are. The older you are, the more likely you are directly related, as in a parent, sibling, spouse, child, who served in the military. And that makes sense, right? Because World War II, 9% of the population served, everyone was involved, right? So older you are, more likely you're directly related. And to our traditional college students, it is very unlikely, right, that they have a direct relative, a parent, right, who was in the military, or a sibling, or anything else. So I think it depends, because it just depends on even, you could be older, but if you're only influenced by, again, what you read, like sometimes with PTSD, I find that, like, really the stats aren't that. If you ask a civilian how many service members have PTSD or veterans, a lot of them are over 50%, right? They'll say 50, 70%. Most studies have it under, I think it's like post 9/11 veterans, between 15 and 12%, right? It's not everyone, right? But that's the narrative, right? And it's an over sensationalization of the experience. Some of the experience is just transitional issues coming from a very structured to a not structured, right? Like, and that can, and then also coming from a place where you had a purpose, a very clear purpose, a very clear role. You knew exactly where you were in that organization, to not having any of that, and that can be jarring, right? So I don't think I can't say whether it's faculty, staff, or students who it's harder to interact with. I think it just depends on what they know, right? It comes back down to exposure, cultural competency, not necessarily, because if you have a student who just plays a Call of Duty 24/7, and I think that's what our experiences were like when it's much more boring a lot of times, right? Like,
my God,
yeah,
it's for me. Sometimes there's nothing to do besides cleaning,
repainting
something, but there's always something to do. The best thing that happens is when there's really nothing to do, you're dismissed on a Friday early, and you feel like you won the lotto. You feel like I think one of the experience I always remember is like when you get like a butter bar, your lieutenant, and they're brand new. You've been there for a while, and when you're outside, you're supposed to salute. So what we used to do, we used to line up one behind another to salute the new lieutenant. So it was like going like crazy. You could see how like after a while he's like, "You idiots!" Like literally, so that was kind of fun. But yeah, the military, like even field training at some point gets boring. You're like, okay, I feel dirty, I'm smelly. Like what the hell am I? I'm tired. What am I doing here? But I do think it opens the mind so you can become adaptable to a situation, a hostile situation. And even though you're so well trained, because I have to give credit, the military does invest a lot of time. You're never trained to be at war. War, it's its own thing. You gain its own experience from war itself. The psychological and mental and physical training you get is to become adaptable. But once you get the experience of war, it's its own thing. It's its own training, because that's where you develop hyper alertness. You have to be hyper alert about everything and anything that can possibly. But not only for yourself, for your battle buddies too, because you depend on them, they depend on you. And you understand that there's a lot of sacrifice that needs to be made, and perhaps a lot of these things develop in somebody uniquely. And yeah, the stats are correct. You know, people that have PTSD. And the issue also is because PTSD can happen a day after, 20 years later. So, but most veterans will develop some sort of PTSD. It just doesn't happen immediately. It's not like a disease that you contaminated someone else. It doesn't happen. Sometimes something drastic have to happen in your life, and that's when,
A memorandum.
yeah, exactly, your PTSD shows up, and you're like, what the hell's going on? I'm losing control. I feel like I'm disassociated with myself, and it's a very unique experience. But that doesn't mean you're crazy. It's just you're going through emotional disorder because of everything you lived that was so traumatic that you couldn't desensitize through the years. And then you can talk to someone, because that's another thing. The prevention systems we need to create for people that come back from deployment. Even if, believe it or not, even if they don't feel like talking, let's talk about anything. How you feeling today? Because you want them to be okay with expressing their emotions. So later on, they're able to, I will say, control and address PTSD in a more, I would say, in a better control environment for themselves, and not be shocked with like anxiety, depression. But why? And the why is always what kills you the most. It's that why. Why am I feeling this way? You know. But it's interesting to hear what you were saying. Also, like there's this perception that men are only better, and you are an expert in this social environment. Hopefully, that's, I would say that mentality is gone, or it's going away. Why do or people believe that women don't respond to danger as men does in, for example, when you walk?
Yes.
I mean, we do. I think it's decreasing definitely. I mean, we've had our like combat veterans that are female, and they're like, they go to the VA, and the VA is like, oh, your husband's
Oh, yeah,
like,
good. Yeah.
what's your husband's, social whatever. It's and they're like offended, like. But I think it's becoming better. I think the VA is getting better at it, to serve the female veteran better, and attend to their different needs, And I think I don't know, current military, I don't know what as far as like the combat, like there are women that serve in combat roles, but they don't necessarily on paper serve in combat roles, or
Because there's no front line anymore, right? It's not trench warfare anymore.
Exactly.
But the military, when I was in, again, about 20 years ago, it's like 14% of the military were women. Now it's about between 17 and 18%. We're still a very small portion of the service, but we're the fastest growing veteran population, right? Because more women are serving. But I think that there's an extra challenge for women who serve, because the military, and how we define masculinity, right, is a masculine institution, and it's supposed to be based off of what we define, right, masculinity as. And so for a woman to walk the line of femininity and masculinity, that I'm proved to be here, like I'm supposed to be here, I'm capable of being here, but also being feminine. I think sometimes that, puts women into a harder position in the service, where they're seen under a microscope more than, like you can have a soup sandwich in your unit that's like a guy could get like a billion different things in the military, but women tend to be pigeonholed into like very few things, right? And in engineers, there are not as many women. There are very few women in my company. That's when I was the only woman in my platoon for a good chunk of time, with almost 30 men. So I think it's changing. I think Urszula's right.
I think it goes back to social norms.
Yes.
Biology, just like why are most teachers female, or most caregivers, healthcare worker, why are they more female than male? Why are men in more of the like, the doctor roles or the lawyer role? You know what I mean? It's like social norms. It's just, I think, how we've been brought up. It's something that we're trying to break those social norms, but I mean, it is true, in fact, like the male body physically has more upper body strength. So there are some physical things, that there's the testosterone, there's I guess it's social norms that, we're trying to break some norms, but some norms are just embedded in us, and it's just how we function as a society, I think, and it's, some things are there and they're meant to be there for a reason, but I think some are not necessarily, like you can have males and females in different positions in different careers, and it's just something that's like it's like the social norms that are hard to break.
Do we talk about women, young women, about the opportunity of joining the military? Do we, or, is that more likely a conversation?
Yeah, definitely.
Right, that's going to be happening with men than it is. Right, who's the target of the recruitment? Who's expressing, oh, you should definitely go into this and do it? And I don't think so. To Ursula's point about social norms, I think it's gradual, right? And then society steers you in directions as well, right? So I don't. It's not about capability always. It's about just incremental change over time. I mentioned my father enlisted during Vietnam, and he was put on a carrier in the Atlantic. His father was in the Navy at the tail end of World War II. My mother's father was in the Army Air Corps at the tail end of World War II. The two of them, my grandfathers, never went to the European theater, never went to Africa, never went to Japan, because they came in at the end, so they just didn't deploy. My father was in the Atlantic during Vietnam. He never went to Indonesia. Right. My brother had been in the military for 5 years before I got in. I deployed twice before he even went once. Right. And so here I'm a woman in 3 generations, and I'm the only one who had boots on the ground up until my brother he went 2 years after I got back. So was that common? Like, if you put our pictures up, all of us in our military uniforms, who are you going to think's the combat veteran in the group, right? You're always going to look to, there's 3 generations of men, right? But I went first, so I think it's just that. And you said, wow, right? It's because people don't oh wow, but if it was reversed, right, then you're like, of course, yeah, I was expecting, right? So we're a product, right, of our environment, so it's just incremental.
I'm trying to coexist. Yeah, I'm trying to coexist. I'm trying to coexist.